Hello, everybody. Wishing you a very happy weekend and welcome back to another very interesting session from PRPOI. This session is very special to us because we have something very interesting for you in terms of career growth, in terms of global aspirations, and this session is aptly named In Transit. We are going to be joined today by two very interesting professionals whose career spans have been across the globe. They have grown through a PR background to very interesting global roles in different countries. And today we are going to hear about their journey. So please join me for this very, very lively session put together by our content curators, Tarunjeet, Rattan, Pooja, Trehan, Dhamecha, and Sonali. That's myself. We have a very special thanks to our media partner, PRmoment. Thank you for being our media partner for this session. And I'm going to now start introducing the panelists for you without any further ado, because I'm sure you're all very curious to hear the session. So our first panelist who's going to be joining us is Bhushan Rao. He is a communication and social consultant, National Australia Bank. He is a marketing communication professional and has worked with multiple companies across India, the UK, Australia, and the wider APAC region. He's a former social content lead for Microsoft Asia Pacific. He specializes in corporate communications and creating engaging content in the digital social media space. Looking forward to welcome Bhushan. Hi, Bhushan. How are you today?
Hi, Sonali. Not too bad, thanks. How about yourself?
Thank you for joining us. And Bhushan has just shared with us that it is a very nice evening in Australia where he is. And he's joined us on his Saturday today. And Bhushan, just give me a moment. I'm going to also introduce our second panelist. Our second panelist who joined us is Nikhil Savio. He's Director Performance Marketing, Dentsu X. Is a marketer. He is responsible for developing and driving marketing initiatives in India and Canada. He began his career in public relations and now specializes in all things paid, search, social media, and digital marketing. He has a business degree from Rockman School of Management and is an advertising major. So here he is. Hi, Nikhil. How are you? You're muted. Both
Hi,
of you are.
Sonali. Hi, Sonali.
Hi,
I'm
Nikhil.
good. How are you?
I'd like to thank you both for joining us today. Hi.
Pleasure
I'd
to be
really like to thank you both for joining us today. I think it's really nice that we have people like you to look up to in the PR community, and you both have just shared with me that you began your careers very similarly. You know each other as well. Of you to give us a little insight into your career journey and your career beginning. Maybe Bhushan, if we could begin with you, if you could just give us a little short gist of your career path for all our viewers today, that would be great.
Sure, Sonali. Yeah. I think like everyone on this group and our community for that matter, I started off as a PR kid. Actually, I did my master's and in PR itself, and also did my bachelor's in mass media. So one of the popular BMM courses of our times. That piqued my interest into public relations, and that's how I ended up in PR. Spent around 4 years, and then decided I would want to explore other markets, specifically Australia, the UK, and the APAC region. And yeah, that things just happened how it happened, and landed up in Australia, and have been in this industry. So I did jump quite a few interesting roles, and I'll talk about it later in this on this. But definitely been into PR and then wider marketing roles that came through.
Okay, nice to know that. And coming to you, Nikhil, can you share with us a small gist of your career trajectory for our readers?
Absolutely. Again, studied bachelor's in mass media with advertising major. In fact, it's funny because Bhushan and I we were classmates in college, and that's when we both started our journeys. And it so happened that we both went to he went to Australia, Canada around the same time. I joined, my first gig was MSL, which is Hammer back then. It was called Hammer back then, and then moved on to corporate communications, and currently working in the digital marketing space here in Canada.
Very interesting. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about these career trajectories and how you move from a PR background actually to the new roles that you have. So we're going to begin with one of the most obvious questions. I'm addressing it first to you, Bhushan, and then I would also request Nikhil for you to take it up after that. So just have a question to ask, and I think that's a question that or most of our viewers are being very interested in is that how did this background in PR actually create this impetus for you to go? I think before the live started, we were all discussing that having a global aspiration as a PR professional. When did that moment come when you decided to opt for a global career, and how did that PR background help you? If you could shed a little light on that.
Sure, quite an important one. So, just to begin with, I actually did my master's in the UK, specializing in international public relations. So, before I could even start working full time in the PR industry, I had a bit of a snippet of how things work in the UK, of the developing countries in terms of the industry. So, after I came back to India, I spent a good amount of 4 years in my first agency, which I should tell you that I was really lucky to work with a amazing, motivating, and an interesting team, right from my immediate team to the wider management in the agency that I worked at. And to answer your question shortly, I think because of the experience that I had across various industries and various clients in that specific agency, it helped me a lot to gain perspective of what does marketing actually entail, how do companies make decisions, how do I actually fit in. So marketing had always been my interest, whether it's content creation, whether it's advertising. But the fact that in PR I got opportunity to actually understand the corporate comms side of experience. So I think majority of us started off our PR and careers reading newspapers every morning in our agencies.
That's true.
I think that's, even though people we look at it as one of those basic tasks to do and we try to run away, but that actually gave me a good context into how do we create corporate content, because coming out of college, as all you know, you don't really know how things work in the advertising, marketing, or social media industry. But looking at some of our business reporting back, or all the big business newspapers, to give you an idea of, okay, this is how a corporate company writes about itself. It's not like one of those fashion articles which is, more fluff and stuff, but it's more about what is my objective, what am I trying to communicate, so things like that. So that really helped me a lot, because ever since I landed in Australia and I have worked in Singapore as well, one thing that stood out when I was in interviews as well is my understanding of corporate language. So I think that's something that can be picked up in any industry, whether it's advertising, whether it's social media, whether it's PR, because not a lot of people in the marketing industry understand the serious language that corporates require. So every time, there's some industries where you have to be very specific in terms of comms, and you can't really, move even 1 inch away from the narrative. So that helped me a lot, understanding how corporates look at marketing and the wider 360 degrees focus on marketing for the companies.
Okay, thank you for that. Very interesting. And I'm going to come back to that point of yours. Nikhil, can we hear a little about when was that tipping point when you decided to shift to a global career?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started my career in at MSL, I was I was very fortunate working with a team that was very experienced, leadership that was very encouraging. I mean, everyone here would know Sunil Gautam and Jaydeep Shirkil and Shubhat Fernandez, all really impeccable in terms of their leadership in the industry. Uh, so for me, that exposure, I remember the first type of client that I got was a real estate client, and And when I started marketing and rather doing public relations for real estate companies, I started realizing that it is far more nuanced than one would expect. And it's also a field where crisis communication is at its best. But at the same time, that tipping point really worked in my favors when I joined Cushman and Wakefield, because when I joined Cushman and Wakefield, I was now talking and working with people from Singapore, people from US and UK. So when I was exposed to that kind of understanding, I was like, okay, you know what? How about I move to these countries and get that experience and gain that experience? So that was that moment for me to kind of say, okay, you know what? Let's try, uh, moving to another country, and I chose Canada to move. So since then, from the time that I moved, I think it's whatever skills that I learned in public relations has helped me immensely, right from my job search in Canada to presenting to talking, in my current job, as well as showcasing ideas. A lot of that we tend to pick up, and I still dip into that experience of writing press releases and writing those daily news updates that has to go at 9 a.m. every day. And it's all of that, so you kind of tune yourself, and like they say, right, old habits die hard, and I'm glad that these habits really remain with me for life. Sonali,
Uh,
you're muted.
Sorry, I tend to notice one thing between you both, which is in common, is that you both have an international degree. Am I wrong? I think I'm right. You both mentioned that in your resumes. So my question to you is, how important is the educational background to for a person aspiring for a global career? Do you feel that having that under your belt helps? And if so, if somebody does not have it currently, but they do have a global aspiration, do you think it makes sense to invest in that degree or in that course? So
I
Bhushan,
mean,
could you?
yeah, sure. So there's two ways of looking at this. So the popular, and again, I'm going to be a little honest from my point of view. So education, like unfortunately, we are not in the field of a technical side, which is engineering, IT, or medicine, or things like that, where things are certain. There is only one way of doing things, and so on. The whole marketing, or for that matter, any arts field where everything is depends on the audience reaction, the different ways of doing things. Education in this field is a bit tricky because the Indian way of understanding education is if I do a course, I should get a job. But when it comes to a master's degree in marketing, PR, or social media, for me personally, I got a lot out of it was getting ready how to take up tasks in a workplace, because I got into my masters right after my undergrad, and that opened up my understanding of how industries work, not just in India but also internationally. And it's not necessary that you need to have a master's degree, especially if you're going abroad. And if anyone's considering to go abroad and they're considering the education route, this is a very common mistake a lot of people do. And I mean, since me and Savio have been living abroad, I think for around 4 to 5 years, we have so many people reaching out to us asking that, hey, I'm coming for this course, will I get a job, and things like that, which is valid. We also had that kind of a mindset when we were leaving. But the thing is, in this field, it's very difficult to be guaranteed a job when you start studying it. But my focus when I was doing the course was to learn as much, was to make contacts in the industry, try to leverage your professors' contacts, figure out what needs to be done, understand how it is in a real life environment, whether it's marketing, PR, or social media, and then step by step try to grow in that industry. A lot of people get stuck up in, if I do a course, I want a job, especially abroad. Things are not as easy. The whole concept of placements, I feel like it's more of an Indian thing, and unless you're in a very specific course, which is um, probably like technical, like I mentioned, whether you're a salesperson or an IT course, or for that matter, an engineering course, we have instances abroad of people getting picked up directly from the universities. But in marketing, I would think it's kind of difficult to do that. So if the mindset is more to learn and then figure out to find a job, I think that's much more successful than directly, because it's a very common thing that people get stuck up in, and the disappointment after not getting a job. Uh, when I see my friends and colleagues who have recently moved, that's the biggest driving force. And it is because when we leave India, we are spending a lot of money for education, and we always thinking about how do we get it back. But that's a tricky one we need to figure. So, but to answer your question, I don't think it's necessary to have a degree to find a job, but it doesn't hurt you if you have a better understanding of the profession. So that's what helped me make it much more easier for myself.
What's your take on
I
that,
think I
Nikhil?
echo the same sentiment. When it comes to education, it's nice to have. It's nice to have a master's, but it is not. It's not a requisite, right? It's not necessary. It's not like a ticket to getting a job. It is not necessarily a way that if this is. It's not as linear as you may think it is, right? So usually, what we think is you have a master's degree, you do an MBA, and then you get this great salary and title and position. Overseas or abroad, it kind of works slightly differently. Is that uh, you are seen as someone who, what do you bring to the table? What value do you bring to the table is really important. And I think if you are able to demonstrate that with whatever certifications or qualifications you have, I think that is of importance to the recruiter or to anybody for that matter, because at the end of the day, education is good if you're trying to upskill. But if
Yeah.
you're going in with the thought that okay, this is the certificate and I will get a job, I think that may have to change if you want to pursue foreign studies or even masters.
Yeah, especially I think in marketing or PR, which are very human interface professions and keep changing their dynamic professions. So thanks for that. I think you've given a lot of hope to a lot of young people here today. So I'm going to come to my next question, and I wanted to ask you that um, what are the key essential skills that you would consider a PR person if they are aspiring for a global career? It could be in a different field as well. What are those key skill sets that you think they should definitely equip themselves with, or spend effort in learning? So again, we'll address this to you first, Bhushan, if you could shed a little light on that.
Sure. Again, while I give you my opinion, again, there is many people will have many different opinions. So obviously, there is no hard and fast rule of what works and what doesn't. But the thing is, when you're moving abroad and assuming that you have Indian experience, you already are specializing in an industry and you have immense experience, whatever you have been doing, whether you're working out of an agency in Mumbai or you're working out of a small stringer in some part of India. It's nothing to say that you don't have experience to succeed abroad. But one thing we need to keep in mind, and I think even probably I made this mistake when I moved in. I used to specialize in automotive PR and working with a lot of sporting clients. And when I moved to Australia, I, like, as a default thinking in my head, I was like, okay, I should look for automotive jobs or automotive PR in automotive industry. But one thing I didn't really come to reality at that point of time was not everything is similar in India and in different countries. In fact, the funny story what happened to me was as soon as I landed in Australia, I think within 2 weeks, the last automotive manufacturing plant in the country shut down, and all the jobs went to Southeast Asia. So obviously, if manufacturing is not happening in the country, obviously the wider jobs are also going to be outsourced, and there is no requirement for automotive PR in the industry. So that's one element. And the second thing is, we as PR professionals, or even for that matter, marketing professionals, we are specializing in a certain country or a certain audience. So, if, for example, like Savio mentioned, he has been working in the real estate industry, he knows the real estate industry in India, but there is no guarantee that this industry will be the same in a different country. If you compare even automotive industry for that matter, while India is so huge and it has its own challenges, the automotive industry in different countries is very different. So there is no guarantee that the skills that you take with yourself when you go to a new country can be used. But the most important thing that I learned we need to carry with us is the ability to have patience and learn as much as you can. because that's the one which helped me a lot, is challenging, asking questions, and admitting that okay, I didn't know this, but I'll go back, I'll pick it up, and I'll come back.
Understand.
Yeah.
So, what about you, Nikhil? What do you think? I mean, I think, Bhushan, you've actually addressed the other question I was planning to ask, which was how the transition actually works. So, interesting. So, Nikhil, can you tell us, did you carry some particular skill sets with you, and were those skills applicable in the job that you now have, or in the roles that you've now done?
Absolutely, 100%. I think uh, PR definitely played a huge foundation, or laid a huge foundation for me, and a very strong one in kind of helping me, one, to begin and to have a career here in Canada, and to as well as grow in that career. And I'll focus on a couple of skills that I packed in my bag when I was leaving from India. So some of the skills that I was looking at, or rather which I went with, is communication skills. I think as PR professionals, every day is a reminder that our communication skills have to be top notch. There is no doubt about it. I don't think there is any margin of error there. So grammatical skills, writing skills, oral communication, as well as how we communicate in terms of when we are writing emails or introducing ourselves to recruiters or to our peers within the network, especially when we go abroad. A PR professional compared to any other marketing professional, PR professional is just set up to be successful. Why? Because think about it. When we write press releases, and the first para needs to communicate all the things that are important for that campaign, like five W's, one H, right? So those are four or five things that we learn. So think about it. You take that piece and you're introducing yourself on a LinkedIn message to someone, in the answering those five W's and one H, and you're sorted, right? So you're already set up for success. You don't. So those are the skills that you can port from anywhere, or from India to anywhere in the world, and that will always remain the same. So I think PR definitely awards you with a lot of skills that you could use across.
Very interesting to. This is one thing about skills, but there's another very interesting point that we'd love to ask you. But that's something that's always been in our mind. It's probably even applicable in India itself. Is that whether it's marketing communication, which is Bhushan, your primary role now, or digital content, etc., which you now do, Nikhil. One very important thing is aspects of culture and language and um, demographies, basically, which obviously will be changing. Psychographics, for instance, will change. Marketing is very subliminal, so is digital content. So how difficult was you to assimilate in your new role in a new culture with a new understanding of all that, because you're bringing of a brilliant background with you, but your cultural affinity or your learning process has all been in India, and you're dealing with people who are probably thinking differently, or their language tonality is different from us. So I'm sure that, like you yourself said, it's not the technical skill so much that is required. It's that understanding of these intangibles that actually define our profession, whether it's PR or marketing or even digital to that extent. So how did you address those challenges? Bhushan, if you can shed some light on it.
Oh, that's interesting. And so, again, my perspective on this is that when you newly move to a newer market, whether it's a newer country or a newer city, the experience that you bring more, it's more of a challenge than a skill, because especially if you're focusing too much on one industry and that industry is not in the new location of where you're going, that's not 100% helpful. But one thing I like to point out, especially because I've been working with a lot of different international professionals in different countries, the education, the basic education and the language skills that we Indians, for that matter, that we have, is actually, I would consider our English and our understanding of marketing top notch. It's not, if you compare ourselves to Europeans or somebody who is coming from a non-English background, and that is a massive advantage that we have. Unfortunately, some of the developing countries still consider that Indians don't have English as their first language, which is ridiculous because all of us have studied English literally from the first day in school. I think that's the reason why Indians generally, or for that matter, even anyone in Southeast Asia who has an English background, they seem to get jobs easier. They are able to build their career well. So that's definitely one of the things, and also the work culture. Like because of the way our society is, we are geared into building a career essentially from 10th standard, and you're thinking about what do we want to become. Not a lot of countries have a system like that where everyone's 100% motivated on doing things at that point of time. Eventually people realize what they want to do and things like that. So as a background, I think that's definitely one of our strengths. But also the ability of unlearning whatever things we cannot use in the newer market and learning new things is also a big skill that we should have.
Unlearning. I like that. I really like that part. So, Nikhil, what do you think?
Yeah, I think when you move to another country, there are a lot of challenges. So, and the challenges essentially are not because lesser, or your English is different than theirs. I think it is also a lot of hard work to understand someone else's culture, because whether you're doing social media, digital marketing, PR, anything, you have to understand the consumer, right? And culture plays a huge role in kind of shaping your content and shaping your communication plans. Keeping that in mind, if you're planning to go maybe to UK, Germany, Australia, Singapore, Canada, it's important to start reading on some of the local newspapers there. Everything is accessible anyways online, so you understand what's the tone, how are journalists actually writing, what are the choice of words, are they using a lot of idioms and phrases, or are they using content that is completely different? Is it focused on the a lot of metaphors used in sports that kind of make way into editorial pieces in Canada? So something, and you would understand that only when you start reading and you start listening to a lot of content that comes out of these countries.
Okay, so I am realizing that certain things which actually are applicable to people in even in India is, and I really like what you said, because listening very critical. I think very few PR people actually, younger ones, they listen, and unlearning. I think that's a very important part, because people tend to think, okay, I know it all and this is the way it's done, and very interesting to hear you see that. Now tell me, I know you both don't really interface a lot with media, but just for our curiosity, do you think media changes across borders, especially print versus digital? Have you got a sense of how the media works in other countries? Is it? I personally feel that Indian media, to quite an extent, barring the current news events, is quite sophisticated in terms of reporting, and and has a very good understanding of analyzing things. But what is your viewpoint on how the media changes across countries?
Bhushan, you want?
Um, maybe Nikhil, you go for it because I'm
Why
getting all
don't
the
you
questions
go ahead
first.
and take it in time?
I'll give you the first chance for once.
Yeah, so I think for the most part, I work with public relation professionals very closely, because as part of Dentsu, we work with a lot of PR agencies and PR executives to shape integrated marketing plans, right? And what I really see is the way the PR community really works here is, yes, there is a press release that goes out. The usual thing always exists. But the way they pitch stories and the way they connect with journalists is very different than what we used to do in India. So, for example, we used to call journalists. We had this whole list, and we used to sit and we used to call and keep pitching our news stories and all of that. But I think here in Canada, at least, I can tell you, uh, an email is sent, nobody calls anyone. An email is sent, an email is responded to by the journalist, or a text message is sent. That's when you actually start talking to the journalist directly, and there is a fair degree of you can see that the conversation is very mature. So as a person who's sending out press releases in Canada, you better know in and out of the company, and you also understand how public affairs and public policies really shape your business plans. So because just like in India, journalists are very well read and very well informed about the sectors. So it's best to kind of have everything and go, and if you don't know something, in India we could get away with it, but here, if you don't know something, it's best to just say that, hey, you know what, I don't know this, but I'll get back to you on it, and leave it at that, versus trying to even wink it to kind of for an answer.
Okay. What about you, Bhushan? Have you had a chance to interact with media in Australia, and what is your thought on how it works?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the benefits of being in the comms space is that comms is not restricted to internal comms or marketing comms. Comms can be anything, and depending on the requirement of the company, whether it's my current role or my previous role at Microsoft, we did have to create content which went out to journalists, and this was across the APAC region. Actually, I would like to point out that it's not just we should not just consider the processes what PR professionals look at, but we should consider the difference in media. So obviously, working in India, we know we have thousands of newspapers, more regional, like maybe hundreds of channels. But the reality in developed countries, and I'll maybe just give you an idea of Australia since I'm based here. We have like I think four news channels and four mainstream channels which have the news element to it, and we potentially have I think four or five national newspapers. That too, if you like start counting ones which do not probably are considered mainstream as such. So imagine from India, we have hundreds of newspapers where you have opportunity to get coverage in different places. Whereas in a developed country like Australia, we just have four or five. So the amount of space that is there for your client's content to go is obviously reduced. So it becomes more of a challenge. And my experience of reaching out to journalists is it's more of a well structured and a matured conversation. So, like, I think all of us have had this in the initial stages of a PR career. We are randomly gone to a business editor or a sub editor, and we're just trying to sell a client, which is not wrong. We're learning about a client, and that's how it works in India. But here, the conversation is very different. If the journalist thinks that you don't have an idea of what you're talking about, there will be no engagement. So that kind of maturity is in the market, and every PR person is expected to not just understand content. The person is trained into more formal engagements with different parts of the media and things like that.
The one question I'm very curious to know is you said four major newspapers and 4 to 5 news channels, but I'm assuming there are a lot of blogs, podcasts, YouTube. I mean, I'm sure online portals. So I am sure that perhaps even more than India, these countries today have a lot more in terms of. I mean, we already know there are fashion bloggers who are got cult following, for instance, YouTubers who have cult following. So I'm presuming that those aspects of digital and social have more than made up for maybe lesser of print media or lesser of TV, as you said. So I'm curious.
100%. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, right? In the last probably decade, because of social media expanding and reaching out boundaries across the country, there is so much opportunity for people to start talking about things. And that's where I feel like we can't use the traditional PR approach of sending a press release or, setting up a one-on-one and things like that. That's when, if you're working with bloggers who know their stuff, like if you reach out to a technology blogger, you can't really talk to him the way you'll talk to a journalist. So it has to be more of an engaging conversation. You need to indulge him in what he is interested in, and how can we get that conversation ahead. So I would consider that to be a discussion of marketing people reaching out to influencers, and the entire process is different because it's I don't think people, I mean, at least in these markets, people look at it as a PR PR value kind of an exchange. They're looking at it in a larger scheme of things, of what is the customer journey, where in that influencers content will my customer get influenced and buy stuff. So because of social media and the kind of measurements and reporting that we have today, the conversation is not just a one-off touch point. It's a wider 360 degrees approach of when does our customer plan to buy a product, and that's where I need to be at that point of time. So that makes it slightly different. But to your point, yes, absolutely. It's not just media anymore. Anyone who knows to create content is essentially a person who can reach out to audiences, and the engagement process of how to go there is changing on a daily basis.
Okay, very interesting. And you are in that space. You are in more of the digital space. So, how much is? And I noticed you wrote all things paid. So, I'm very curious to know how much does the transition happen in other countries between paid and earned media? I mean, we are noticing a big shift in India also, where a lot of publications are going paid, a lot of space is going paid. Influencers themselves are saying they can't keep creating free content for brands. So how does that change to in another country? What is the ratio, if I may ask? And I'm sorry if it may sound like a very foolish question, but what is the ratio, say, between earned content and paid content, especially in the social and digital space?
Right. So it is really important to define what do you consider as paid and what do you consider as earned. For example, if I have gone to an influencer and I'm paying them say 150,000 for like say 5 posts or 6 posts, uh, I'm definitely paying them. So I'm assuming that they are going to also push these ads in the form of ads and partnerships and all that. There is another component to it. So what happens is the publisher, or say this, it could be a newspaper, it could be a blogger, it could be a television channel, it could be anyone, goes in a form of content partnership. And when that content partnership happens, we on the digital side of things amplify it. So yes, for example, let's take an example, Times of India. Times of India has so many readers, it has so much market penetration. But it's when we put paid, we are going beyond Times of India. But we are still using Times of India as a content partner. We are saying that upfront to people that you are consuming sponsored content, and there are rules and regulations around that. But to answer your question, what is earned and paid? I think if you're looking at solely on media, then that is really low. I would say almost 15%, or say 20%, and 80% is paid. And the reason for that is because most of these channels, you talk about YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, their organic reach is very limited, right? And therefore you require paid support in order to amplify and enhance your reach and market penetration.
Thank you for that. I'm very curious to know, and I think so are a lot of other people. Could you share some very interesting brand campaigns that you have done in other countries? We are very curious to know what roles you're playing there right now. Maybe it could be from now or it could be from earlier. So, could you share something interesting that you did, and how it was a learning process for you? It would really be helpful for us to understand the transition also. So, which of the gentlemen would like to go first
Yes,
on
I
this?
would definitely go with this.
Sure, man, no worries. So yeah, I mean, again, in terms of okay, just to give you a background. So after I moved to Australia, I obviously didn't get into the PR industry as such. Slowly started getting experience in marketing and digital marketing and the social media space, creating content. So first first few gigs which I got was more of working with smaller agencies, working with smaller businesses. And I was surprised that smaller businesses in India versus smaller businesses in developed countries are very different. The revenue scales that these guys have is much more higher. but again they are not as big as the ones in India. So their understanding of marketing can differ a lot, but they have more money to play with. So that's the difference that marketers feel in that space. Some of the innovative campaigns that I've run is, so I was working this one agency, and my client was a fisheries charter service. So basically, he used to take people out to actually go show how to fish, catch a fish, and come back. And that's like a sport here in this part of the world. Something like maybe a safari, but obviously in the water. So that the business was really good, but he didn't really have a reach on social. He didn't know how do I reach out to people, how do I show what I'm doing. So we actually ran an entire campaign of using Facebook Live, and this was again, I'm assuming, in 2015. So Facebook Live was not as big; it was just launched. But by using Facebook Live, getting that content out on social media, get that, it went out to so become such a big campaign that there were actually case studies written by marketing magazines here talking about how this business grew because of using social. So that's just an example on a smaller scale, because the experience that smaller businesses have, they have a lot of stuff to do, and the returns is immediate compared to a big brand who changes a strategy in one day, and it will take some time to see whether the strategies have worked or not. But that experience for me was amazing because we saw, I think, sales double up in just a fortnight, and obviously that gave us more opportunity to try more stuff. So as a digital marketer, I think that's the most exciting part, when you actually get an opportunity from your client to try something new. Because as you know, traditional clients are like, I don't want to do anything risky, I want to get my objective. But in the digital space, I think that's the place where people bet big, also win big, because so many tools are available. If you don't know what to try and experiment, that could be the difference between success and no success.
What about you, Nikhil? Anything interesting to share for you from your end? Something that you did, a recent campaign, or something challenging that you did across one of your new roles?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was for a brand known as Lexus, the automobile luxury brand. And what was really interesting is, I was managing the social media page and the paid advertising part for Lexus, and we saw that a lot of people love taking photographs of their cars, right? So and we were like, why not have a campaign around this? Like, let's educate them to actually click good photographs, right? So not that the photographs were bad, but there was a huge learning curve for them in terms of how to take the photograph of your car or the car that you really love, and because people are enthusiastic about cars and very passionate about the cars they own. So we got an influencer who is a photographer, and told him to kind of take this car across the geographies of Canada. So you would see Lake Moray, you would see Alberta, Calgary, Edmonton, and the entire series was based on how to click a photograph of your car. Basically, what are the kind of rules? What are the things that you need to keep in mind? Lighting, reflection, what are the angles? And you won't believe it, like that piece with that influencer, which we amplified through paid, gave us enough of photographs to last for the whole year from all these enthusiasts who own a Lexus, which then resulted, we created a whole campaign out of that called as Lexus Pride. We started promoting that as well, and the dealers automatically started seeing higher foot traffic into dealerships and inquiries, and more of referral traffic from their friends, just because they put out an amazing photograph of their Lexus out there, and that inspired someone else.
That's amazing, and I think human nature is pretty much similar all over, because I'm sure that even in India we have a similar sense of pride. For instance, for our cars, maybe we may not execute it with that much adventurousness as you did, but I think today most people, thanks to Instagram and thanks to maybe not so much Facebook, but maybe thanks to the behavior of consumers remains pretty similar across these different platforms, despite other countries.
Right.
What one very curious question that I have to ask you is, and I'm sure I've a lot of our viewers would want to know. When you shifted initially, did you take up extra projects in the organizations that you were working with to upskill? Because obviously you came from a certain background and you were moving to another vertical. So at that time, did you put in extra effort? Did you take up new projects? Did you try to reinvent yourselves in different ways at that time? So maybe Bhushan, you could answer that because you.
Yeah, sure. So again, talking about when we moved, so everybody's journey is pretty different. Like what Savio went through in Canada and I went through in Australia. There's no real way of comparing it because it's two different countries, two different industries, two different individuals. I just like to focus on how I moved because I think that was the biggest myth buster. Even when I was speaking to a few PR colleagues in the past few years, I actually applied for an Australian PR, a permanent resident visa, and I got it because of my PR experience in India. So I don't know if a lot of people know this, but if you have a certain amount of experience in public relations in India and you have a master's degree, at that point of time, the Australian government was inviting PR professionals to actually move to Australia and come and start up their career. So this was actually a known fact for a lot of technical industries, but I don't think marketing professionals ever knew or even considered going abroad because I'm not sure. Like even for me, it took me a lot of research at that point of time in 2012, 2013. Went to many people, didn't find a lot of info because none of our seniors had tried to do something like this. So eventually, when I got it and I moved there, it was pretty simple. But the big difference was that I didn't have a job. I didn't have a job for 6 months. I was not being accepted at even entry level comms or PR or any kind of roles because the law of the land was you need to have local experience. It doesn't matter what level, what seniority, even if someone comes with that 15 years of experience in India, unless they have certain experience with dealing with that specific company or the audience, unfortunately they have to start from scratch. So that is the biggest thing. People mistake it or people ignore it. That's a fact for all professions, not just marketing or PR. Even if you come in from a sales background, unless you have that bridge building capability of understanding the audience, it becomes an issue. And unfortunately, this is the chicken and egg situation. You go for the first job, they say you don't have local experience, but how do you get local experience? That's not possible. So I think that's the biggest challenge. And how you upskill from there, one of the big things is networking with organizations like the PRPOI, but the local organizations in where you're based, essentially trying to work with, basically it's more of networking with them, understanding that where is the opportunity to grow. And as you know more people, you get small opportunities to, as maybe an entry level comms person who's creating content on websites, things like that. And as you get more experience in the region, that's when you eventually get the roles that you are after. But that transition period is 99% applicable to everyone who moves countries. Very few of people luckily find themselves into awesome roles. But again, that's one of the questions or suggestions that I keep telling people who come and reach out to us, that how do I move abroad? That's one thing that everyone has to be ready from day one, essentially.
Thank you for that, and I think even I didn't know. So big cheers for our PR industry that it's a relevant skill set for other countries. That was very encouraging to hear. So Nikhil, what about you? How did you, when you initially moved? What were there any challenges that you faced as Bhushan shared, and did you take on some extra projects or did you do something differently to fit in?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I moved, there was no craze about express entry. So there was nothing called as express entry. I know today, if you go to India and ask anyone over there in about Canada, they'll be usually you will get an answer in terms of express entry. But I got into and I could only qualify to apply to Canada is because I had 5 years of experience as a communication consultant or in public relations. So that was a NOC code, National Occupancy Code, that Canada had that only if you're a PR professional or a communication consultant. I'm not even talking marketing here. I'm only talking PR and communication. That's when you can get it. And thankfully, I didn't move any careers, and from MSL to Cushman and Wakefield, it was corporate communication. So I kind of got in there. So that is that, right? So PR definitely kind of, I would say, gifted me that started that transition for me. As far as challenges in Canada are concerned, they're very similar to what Bhushan said, and I think it is similar for, even, you talk about New York or you talk about London. It's going to be the same. You don't really get in a job the minute you land, as much as it is made to believe. And second, nobody can promise you a job, and nobody can sell you opportunities that the minute you land you will get a job. So none of that really happens. And what you really need to come with is faith, perseverance, and an open mind. So if you have an open mind, you will kind of soak everything like a sponge in terms of learning and knowledge, and you will be able to overcome a lot of challenges, because challenges will come your way. I think it is important to come with an open mind as well. And again, like Bhushan also alluded to this, that uh, if you're coming through a transfer, I think that's a better opportunity and a better way to transition into a new country versus coming net new. That road is a little rocky. It still takes you to the place where you want to go, but you have to work harder. It's simple. It's one. If you get transitioned, it's easier. If you go on your own, it is harder, but you will learn a lot in the market. So when I wanted to go to Canada, I picked up projects. When I was at Cushman and Wakefield, I picked up projects in digital marketing. So my digital marketing job and digital marketing foundation was also laid at Cushman and Wakefield, when I started working with the APAC team on digital marketing, web development projects, jQuery, JS Angular, and working with dev teams around there, and got a sense of how digital marketing essentially works. So if you find an opportunity, if you get an opportunity in your current workplace to upskill, please go ahead, go to your bosses and say that, hey, you know what, I want to go work on this project. How can I help you? And offer that kind of help, and find it as an opportunity to upskill and learn.
So we have some very curious readers, viewers, and they've sent some very. So I'm going to request you to keep these ones really short and concise, because there are loads of questions that they have asked. So the first one is, where does one get info on some job postings? Like, where did you go in your respective countries to find the jobs that you
I think
look for?
LinkedIn, and so every country has their own way of working, and as you go and research, you find out those forums. But more or less, it's LinkedIn is definitely a big place to be, and you might have a local job site, a job board. If you're looking at Australia, it is a site called Seek.com. Majority of the jobs show up over there.
Yeah, in
Okay,
Canada it
great.
would be LinkedIn. In Canada it would be LinkedIn, and Indeed. Indeed is pretty popular in India also, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
Job public posting, websites that will give you a good understanding about the job market.
Okay. Also, what is the job market like in your respective countries this year? I mean, would you recommend people moving out this year to look for a job in different countries, or would you recommend them to defer it a little?
I think in Canada, I would say, if possible, defer it. Simply because everything is in a state of flux. Everything is very precarious. A lot of people have been laid off during the pandemic. So there is it's uh, it's a market with a lot of talent pool, right? And with that kind of a talent pool, you don't want to enter the market. You want to mitigate risk. I would say hold on, try looking at Q1 2021. That is the time you start planning and thinking of coming to the country.
Yeah, very similar here in Australia as well. I think most of the developed countries, or for that matter, the countries that have a similar culture are actually facing a lot of issues. Like, for example, Melbourne, where I'm based, we have essentially been locked down for 2.5 months. So, except groceries and except hospitals, nothing is open for 2.5 months. So, obviously, marketing budgets have been cut. My advice would be, I mean, again, it depends on where the person is based. If the person is already based in Australia, there are opportunities, but if you're considering moving now, it's definitely a no at this point. at least till the time the coronavirus bit subsides and
Yes.
somewhat it recovers.
So you suggest deferment. Okay, we have some very specific questions here. I don't know if you can answer that, but I'm going to try because is there any are there any opportunities for celebrity PR in your different countries or and not just celebrity PR, maybe niche verticals? Are there more opportunities in certain niche verticals? Can people apply for those?
Not really. So again, it goes back to a very important element, that is the PR industry, right? I think we didn't probably touch on this as much as we would like to. PR industry is very different as compared to India. So I mean, we all started our careers in India, and we could choose our choices on, I want to do corporate PR, I want to do healthcare PR, and so on. In Australia, at least, there are not a lot of agencies, and the kind of work that happens is very focused. So there are more boutique agencies over here which focus on certain elements, and to build a career in that, it takes some amount of time, and the amount of time that you get into that space. I don't think celebrity PR as such is as big an industry. Over here, I'm not very close to that specific industry, but from what I understand, a lot of celebrities, in fact, compared to India, I don't think we have a lot of celebrities in Australia because it's a much smaller country. But obviously, the ones who are famous, they work with brands, and through that, there's a lot of associations with either marketing professionals or agents as such. So there is opportunity, but again, it depends on which city, which kind of celebrity, cricketers or a television personality, things like that. But I would definitely think the numbers are very limited compared to India.
Okay. I am picking up another question and I'm going to link it to what you said, Bhushan, earlier in this conversation, where you said that you're actually not looking at measurement for PR or measurement of successful campaigns only in terms of number of impressions, etc., but how the tonality of the campaign works. So, can you shed some light on how, in your respective roles, you now measure? And this is a ongoing conversation for us also in PR. There is no even today. There is no one way of measurement, or there is no
Correct.
one way beyond the numbers, say number of impressions. What do you suggest, or what are the rules tools that you all are applying to maybe get better measurement of success of PR metrics or successful digital campaigns?
I think, yeah, that's really interesting. And PR value as the most controversial term that we all know about. Obviously, as time passes, we come to know that it doesn't really mean much. But again, if you have to define a PR agency's work based on all the hard work that's done, we need some definition. But the interesting thing that's happened in the last few years is social media and the amazing real-time stats that come through. So talking as somebody who has worked on the client side, marketing doesn't look at PR, advertising, social media individually, even though from a management standpoint, even I know agencies get actually seen whether they're performing or not. But from a business's standpoint, everything is looked at what is the business's objective. If the business's objective is awareness, social media provides a lot of that. It can give you stats on how many people have seen that, how often has it seen, and things like that. From what I've seen in the organizations that I've worked for, PR is used more as a reputational tool. It's not necessary that I want to reach all the newspapers or that is the objective, but this could also be that specific company.
I know. I wish our clients understood that, Bhushan, and I think that's always that push and tug. Sorry, I'm running out of a lot of time here, so I'm gonna just quickly take
Sure.
Nikhil's before I wrap up. So, Nikhil, what do you suggest?
I think when it comes to measurements in digital marketing, we look at a lot of measurements all the time, which also encompasses public relations and what the work that they do. The way we package it is to brand lift studies. So understanding the delta between controlled and exposed groups. So that is brand lift studies for you. We run Google consumer surveys. So Google consumer surveys gives us result within 7 days from the time they survey. So these are really powerful groups to understand which channel that we are investing in is really giving us the ROI or is impacting the brand ad recall levels and brand lifts.
Okay. So I'm really going to have to this session. I don't know where the time went, and suddenly I realized we are almost at the end of this. So Bhushan and Nikhil, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your time. And I know you've joined in very odd hours of different time zones. We are in 3 different time zones on this live. I just want to let you know that we keep expecting a lot of questions because the video runs on the Facebook page. So I would request if you can pop back in and look at certain questions. And if you feel like giving answers to some of them, it would be really nice. Some of them have actually addressed questions to you, which I have not taken up. So if you want to take out a little time and give some answers to those, if you feel it's relevant, of course, please do so. And really thank you for being here today for us. I would also like to thank our content curation team, which is Tarunjeet, Pooja, and myself. And I'd love to thank our media partners, PRmoment, who help us amplify these sessions and take them to a wider audience. And I'd just like to wish you both a very happy weekend. I think, Bhuchan, you have less of it than us here in India, and Nikhil, you're still to enter the weekend. So that, and I think what you've really helped us today is demystify all those myths and encourage a lot of people to maybe have global aspirations in their career. If not immediately, then a few months from now when things settle down a bit. So thank you very much, gentlemen, and it was a pleasure to have you here on PRPOI
The
Facebook
pleasure
Live.
is all ours. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sonali.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you.